In this video we're going to tie the EP Ghost Shrimp. The hook we're going to start off with is a Gamakatsu SL45 bonefish hook in a size 4. You can also use an SC15 as well. And we're just going to start off with some 6/0 orange thread and some small nickel plated eyes. Now you can also tie this with Beadchain eyes. I carry both whenever I go bone fishing, just depending on the depth that the bonefish are in for the day, and also kind of the spookiness of them. You can use mono thread for this fly as well. That's what Enrico usually uses. We're just going to use standard thread today. It's a little easier to manage and deal with. First material we're going to tie in is just 2 strands of standard pearl crystal flash. And we're just going to tie this in right behind the eyes and work it down a little ways down the bend. I like to take my dubbing and my crystal flash a little bit farther down the bend on this fly. Then we're just going to hang it to the side out of the way. Next thing we're going to do is dub the body. For this you can use really any type of tan dubbing. I'm just going to use I have an old streamer brush that's kind of mangled and all goofed up, an EP streamer brush. So I'm just going to take some strands from that and dub that onto the hook. But like I said, you can use Antron dubbing, synthetic dubbing, ice dubbing. I really like kind of a semi-translucent tan dubbing for this fly. And you got to be real careful not to overdo it with the dubbing on this fly. You just want enough to cover the hook and get the job done. You don't want to really lump it on there, or else you'll end up with way too much and you'll get a lumpy body on your fly. And I like to add it little by little. I don't like to add it all at once. And don't worry if a little bit of that thread kind of shines through. That's okay. That kind of adds to the translucent appearance to this fly. That's, after all, what a ghost shrimp is kind of a translucent bodied little shrimp. So a little bit of orange kind of just adds a little bit of that shrimpiness look to it. So nothing wrong with that at all. On a trout fly, of course, you would want to kind of cover all that, but on a shrimp, I like to just go with the flow and just kind of let some of that radiate through. And I'm going to also dub around those dumbbell eyes just to kind of clean it up. You don't have to do that. After all, this fly is going to ride hook up, so you're probably not going to even really see it, but it just kind of helps clean everything up. Really just makes the fly look a little more uniform. I've got one straggly piece there. You can just trim out any of those long stragglers if you got them. Sometimes the stragglers are a good thing. Sometimes the fish like a little bit of shag on it. If that's the case, you can actually take a brush and brush out all these fibers and make it look a little shaggy. Then we're going to take our 2 strands of crystal flash. We're just going to twist them up, twist them together, so you get kind of a little crystal flash rope. And we're actually going to counter wrap this crystal flash the opposite way that we wrapped the dubbing. So that first wrap I just do there right at the bend, and then I kind of jump onto the body. First couple wraps are always the hardest. Once you get going, it gets a little easier. And I kind of make those wraps a little closer together when I start, then I spread them out as I spiral that stuff forward. And once I get to the eyes, I just kind of jump in front of them and grab them with a few wraps of thread. and you could trim that crystal flash out of there. Then I like to invert the fly for this step. We're going to take a little bit of pearl Midge flash this time. Similar material, just a lot finer, a lot more supple as well. We're just going to tie that in right at the midway point of that Midge flash, and I'm going to take the other strands and just fold them over to the side. So I'm essentially tying in one piece twice, making for 4 pieces total. And I just pull them back. I'm going to trim them about twice as long as the shank of the hook. And we're going to take some black Midge flash, if I can get it to cooperate here. Same thing, tie it in right at the middle point, fold it back, double it over, and also trim. Now the black I like to trim longer than the pearl, because the black are essentially the antennae of the shrimp. And then I like to kind of also uneven or kind of taper, I should say, the tips of the crystal flash, which means I trim them to unequal lengths. I just get in with my scissors and trim a centimeter off or two, just to kind of not really make them look so uniform. Then you'll have a little crystal flash clump there, and that's all the flash you really need. Now the next material we're going to tie in is going to be the legs. We're going to use the micro-sized Bonecrusher legs in kind of a variegated sand color. We're going to tie these in on each side of the fly. You can also use speckled crazy legs, you can use silly legs, you can use any of these. The micro size is kind of cool, a little different than kind of the standard silly legs that are out there. These Bonecrusher legs come in a smaller size, which is that micro size, which I actually really like for these bonefish flies. Then you can trim those about the length of the pearl crystal flash, which is twice the length of the shank of the hook. A little shorter if you like. I don't like to have my legs too long on my bonefish flies. It's actually easy to make them way too long, and bonefish can actually just nip at your legs sometimes if they're being real picky. Now the next step is to tie in the wing, and for that we're going to use some EP fibers. We're using kind of a 3D sandy color for this fly. You can use tans, clears, whites, minnows, whatever color you're essentially going for your bonefish fly. The tans are probably the most common and most widely used. We're going to take a section here, it's about 3 inches long. Kind of align all the fibers as best as you can. Then I'm going to pull out kind of half of the clump. So the top half, I'm just going to slightly pull out a few of the fibers, and what that's going to do is give those fibers a little bit of taper. Then I'll go over here to the other side and do the same kind of thing. Just pull out a few of the fibers, basically making them uneven. What you'll end up with is kind of this little taper without having to trim anything with your scissors. Now when I tie this in, I'm actually going to tie it in just a little shorter than the halfway point. So I'll kind of hold it at the halfway point, but I'll make sure I kind of tie it in a little shorter. The reason is we're actually going to take these fibers and double them over back up onto themselves, and I want to continue with that taper. So I'm going to tie them in with the short portion first, and I'll show you why, because when I fold them over, that long portion will kind of continue the taper of the fly. Now the next step is to tie in the eyes. I'm going to take some of these EP pre-made mono eyes, or crab and shrimp eyes. EP ones are made perfect just about every single time, so they're real easy to use right out of the bag. I'm going to hold them right onto the tip of the hook. I'll just hold them there. I'll come in with my pliers, and I'm just going to grab them right where I'm going to tie them in with my thread. Then I'm going to mash them really hard with the tips of my pliers, and I'm going to fold over those eyes with my pliers. And I'll just kind of really make sure that I mash down that monofilament as tight as I can. Then I'm going to trim them. And mash them maybe once more after I trim them. And that's going to be where I tie them in. So I'll just tie them in at the same time, if I can. Sometimes they roll on you a little bit. Just grab them with your thread. There we go. Oh, these are fighting me a little more than normal. Let's try this once again. There we go. And you'll see them kind of roll to each side. You just want to make sure that they fall where you want them. This rubber leg's really bothering me. There we go. Essentially, that's how you want them to sit on the hook. They'll just kind of fall to each side. Then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take our thread all the way forward to the eye. I'm going to fold that last hank of EP fibers back up onto itself. And I'm going to creep my thread up onto it and secure it right to where we secured that first piece. Then I can just kind of clean up this head a little bit. Sometimes this thread likes to walk around and move on you. It's pretty easy. These EP fibers are really freaking slippery. So a lot of times that thread likes to move, so it takes a little bit of finessing and really exact thread wraps to really secure it and cover everything up. It's really slippery stuff. Then we'll whip finish. You can see that wing, I got a nice perfect taper without actually having to trim anything. Kind of a neat little trick. I'll pull them all together here. Take it off the vise to marry up that wing. Sometimes you have to work the material together just to kind of finish it and marry them all up. I actually have this little eye that got a little caught in it. There we go. Come on. Alright. Just like that. And those eyes act as the weed guard, so as you're stripping it along, any weeds will kind of brush up on it, but if a fish eats it, these can go down and you'll be able to really stick that bonefish. And the last thing we're going to do is take a little bit of Zap-A-Gap and really coat that head with a nice little clump of glue. And that'll keep it nice and durable. But great little bonefish fly, similar to a gotcha or something like that, but a lot more durable. These EP fibers are almost indestructible. You can use them. I've had flies where I've used for almost an entire 6-7 hour day and have not had it really fall apart and kept catching fish on them. So great little fly, lots of movement, lots of translucency to it too. Once these EP fibers get wet, really looks shrimpy. That is the EP Go Shrimp.